Discover the incredible hidden truth behind a life-changing condition affecting 1 in 100 men. Jake Thompson wiped the sweat from his brow, the familiar scent of motor oil engulfing him like a comforting embrace. Inside his small mechanic shop in the heart of a close-knit Midwestern town, he found solace in wrenches and engines rather than the world outside. A proud father and devoted husband, Jake was the embodiment of the hard-working American spirit. Yet, underneath his jovial smile, a tempest brewed, one he dared not reveal. Social anxiety gnawed at his insides, whispering that he was less than, turning simple gatherings into unbearable challenges. The upcoming transition of his son to high school loomed like a dark cloud, deepening his fears. At home, Jake's laughter filled the rooms, but in the silence of the night, his chest tightened with worry. Sarah, with her warm heart and gentle eyes, sensed something amiss. She tried reaching out, urging him to open up about his struggles. But each word felt like another weight added to his already heavy heart. He avoided family outings, leaving the kids puzzled. Just last week, they had asked, "Dad, why don't you talk to Mom's friends at the barbecue?" Each question pierced him like a dagger, deepening the chasm between them. Then Mark moved in next door, a flashy entrepreneur who seemed to shine brighter each day. Jake watched as Mark easily captured the attention of friends and neighbors, sending Jake spiraling deeper into insecurity. The pressure mounted, each small-town gathering became an excruciating reminder of his struggles. He stood at the edges of events, arms crossed, fading into the background. With each handshake and smile from friends, Jake felt the spotlight glaring down on him, inflating his fears beyond what he could bear. The annual charity event was approaching, promising a night of laughter, music, and community spirit. Jake dreaded it like a child fears the dentist. The very thought filled him with dread. Just as anxiety threatened to consume him, everything shifted during a fateful confrontation with Mark. Underneath the glow of string lights and the warm hum of laughter, Jake felt the air grow thick. Mark, ever charismatic, challenged him to share his thoughts, something he had never been comfortable doing in public. The crowd turned, their gazes heavy with expectations. Suddenly, Jake found the courage rising within him. The weight of observation morphed into a catalyst he never expected. As he spoke, his truth spilled out. He bared his fears, his insecurities, the struggle that sat like a stone in his chest. "I am tired of feeling less," he exclaimed. A powerful silence enveloped them, thick with unspoken judgments and unacknowledged vulnerabilities. Every eye in the room felt sharp, yet the tension broke as murmurs rose, a wave of empathy cascaded among the crowd. Yes, they shared struggles too, shadows of vulnerability weaved into the fabric of American life. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As comfort and understanding swirled in the air, Jake felt acceptance bloom in his heart. But just when he thought he had conquered his fears, a voice emerged from the back of the crowd, echoing a deeper question about strength and vulnerability that left Jake pondering. Would he continue to challenge the very perceptions that once held him captive, or would he slip back into the shadows that felt so familiar? The weight of possibility hung heavy, and the moment crackled with hope. What would come next for Jake Thompson? Jake stood frozen for a moment, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had just laid bare his vulnerability in front of everyone. A mixture of hope and fear swirled inside him like a hurricane. The energy from the crowd felt electric, a force that could either elevate him higher or tear him down. What if they judged him? What if this newfound strength slipped through his fingers? He glanced toward Sarah, whose eyes lingered on him with a blend of pride and love. For the first time, he noticed the faint worry lines on her forehead begin to fade, replaced by a soft smile. It was as if, in that brief moment, she saw the man she believed he could be. Her support and comforting presence anchored him. Jake? Mark's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. You okay? The question, seemingly innocent, felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight at his chest lighten. I am. I think I might finally be getting there. To his shock, applause erupted from the crowd. An older gentleman at the front shouted, "That's right. We're all a little broken, Jake." Others joined in, clapping and nodding, creating a chorus of validation that surged through him. Jake's heart raced, buoyed by this unexpected acceptance. It was as if the room had transformed into a warm embrace, each person sharing a little of their own struggles. He thought back to the isolation he felt before, the fear that had governed his life. Maybe stepping into this light was just what he needed. Later that evening, as music and laughter filled the air, Jake found himself standing with Sarah at the bar. They laughed together, their heads leaning in slightly, sharing secrets that made them both burst into giggles. It felt soothing, a reminder of why they fell in love in the first place. "Tell me, Jake," Sarah began, her tone light but curious. "What just happened up there?" He hesitated, unsure how to put it into words. I just realized it's okay to be real. All this time, I thought that everyone else was perfect. But they aren't. And neither am I." The words felt liberating as they rolled off his tongue. Sarah squeezed his hand. "You're brave. We all have our own battles we fight. I never thought I'd see you stand up like that." With a newfound connection blooming between them, Jake's anxiety began to ebb away. But even in this moment of clarity, he felt another wave of fear rising, a sense of what would be expected of him now. But what if I can't keep it up? What if I mess it all up? "Then you try again," she murmured, her gaze holding him steady. "You don't have to be perfect, you simply have to be you." As they swayed gently to the music, a realization washed over him. Each person in the crowd, from the moms with their loaded nacho plates to the teenagers joking around on the side, faced their own struggles. They weren't just spectators, they were part of this journey. A familiar face caught his eye just then. Mark, chatting animatedly with a group. Jake felt a flicker of resentment rise again but quickly suppressed it. Strength lay not in envy but in embracing the reality that they were all flawed together. Perhaps this could even lead to an unexpected friendship, but somewhere in the back of his mind lurked a shadow, the question of whether Mark would see Jake as an equal now, or forever look down on him. The doubts lingered, but Jake felt determined to challenge them. Maybe his greatest battle was just beginning. As the laughter swirled around him like confetti, Jake took a deep breath, ready for whatever was next. He couldn't predict the future, but he was willing to face it. What would the next step be for Jake? Would he manage to forge genuine connections, or was he risking losing more than he had already faced? The uncertainty loomed, an invitation to embark on a path he had never dared to walk. Jake woke up the next morning with the sunlight trickling through the curtains, weaving patterns of warm gold across his face. His mind raced with thoughts about the night before. It felt surreal, like stepping off a cliff and discovering he could fly, if only for a moment. Yet, deep down, anxiety danced in the corners of his mind. How would he navigate this brave new world he had just stepped into? He rolled over to the familiar sight of Sarah still asleep next to him. Her lips curled softly in a smile, revealing a tranquility that calmed the storm within him. He took a moment to drink in the image, every detail managing to brush away the lingering shadows of self-doubt. Gently, he leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Hey, sleepyhead," he whispered. She stirred but didn't wake up. Jake smiled, feeling happiness rise like a tide. After a quick shower, he slid on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. Breakfast seemed like an expedition at the moment, but he decided to brave it. He tiptoed into the kitchen, careful not to make a sound. The smell of pancakes wafted in the air, perfect. Flipping the last pancake, he couldn't shake the feeling of something big looming ahead. His phone buzzed on the counter, an innocent interruption of his morning thoughts. It was a text from Mark. "Hey man, can we talk later? Got something to discuss." Jake's heart sank. He could feel the old worries creeping back in. Was Mark going to remind him that last night was a fluke? That he didn't belong in this new circle? An overwhelming wave of unease gripped him, making him question what it meant to be vulnerable and real. He stared at the pancake, suddenly losing all interest in breakfast. Questions consumed him. What if he wasn't strong enough to face whatever Mark wanted to say? Moments later, Sarah's arms wrapped around him from behind, pulling him out of his spiraling thoughts as she nestled her chin on his shoulder. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur. "Just got a text from Mark," Jake admitted, the weight of the words spilling out like syrup over his pancake. "He wants to talk." "About what?" she asked, turning him around to face her. "I don't know. Something about last night, or I guess things changing." The anxiety bubbled up again, threatening to choke him. "Change can be good, Jake," Sarah replied, her eyes steadying him. "Remember last night? You faced a crowd. You can handle a conversation with one person." The truth settled in. She was right. It was just one conversation. Jake took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "I can do this," he murmured more to himself than to Sarah. They spent the rest of the morning sipping coffee and sharing stories that felt like stepping stones through the fog of uncertainty. Later in the day, Jake drove to meet Mark, a mix of apprehension and hope swirling inside him. As he parked, he caught a glimpse of himself in the rearview mirror. Time to shed the old skin, he thought. Time to embrace everything he had found. Walking into the cafe, he saw Mark sitting at a corner table, looking contemplative. Jake felt his heart race. What was this conversation going to be about? Would it bring clarity, or would it stir up new doubts? "Hey, Jake," Mark greeted, a hint of something serious behind his casual tone. Jake took a seat, his stomach nodding with anticipation. "Hey," Jake replied, trying to sound nonchalant. Mark shifted slightly, and Jake knew this wasn't just a casual chat. "I wanted to talk about last night, and some things I've noticed about you." Jake's breath caught in his chest. This was it. As a mix of hope and dread flooded through him, he couldn't help but wonder, would Mark's words lift him higher, or would they send him spiraling down again? Their eyes locked, and Jake realized that whatever came next could change everything. But Jake wasn't ready for the change he was about to hear. Mark leaned back in his chair, looking pensive. The cafe buzzed with life around them, a toddler's laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low hum of conversations. But in that moment, all Jake felt was the heavy thud of his heart. Last night was something else, wasn't it? Mark began, tearing Jake's thoughts from their spiraling path. "I mean, you surprised everyone." Jake nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety loosening just a bit. "Yeah, it was freeing," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Mark studied him closely, as if trying to gauge how deep the impact of the night had truly gone. "Here's the thing, Jake. A lot of us struggle with our own insecurities. I know I do. But you really stepped up. You spoke from a place of authenticity that's rare." Jake felt his cheeks flush, warmth spreading through him. It was more praise than he was used to, and it felt good. But alongside it came a whisper of doubt. "Thanks, man. But what do you mean by that? What does it really change?" Mark took a deep breath, leaning in closer. "I've been watching you for a while now. You've got something special, something that's been buried for too long. It's like you stepped out of a shell. But you have to own it, you know. Be willing to face the messy parts too." Jake swallowed, the lump forming in his throat. "What if I'm not ready for all that?" "None of us really are," Mark countered, a look of understanding crossing his face. "But it gets easier. The longer you push those feelings down, the heavier they become. I think you've started to find the freedom that comes with embracing your true self." Jake's mind raced. Freedom. It felt like a coin he was only just beginning to turn over. But with freedom came vulnerability, and he'd never been the kind of person who wore his heart on his sleeve. But what if I fail? The question slipped out before he could contain it. Failure is part of the process, Mark said. When I first started speaking out, I bombed a few times. But each failure taught me something valuable. It helped me refine my message and find my voice. I want you to know, it's your journey to take. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to show up. Their exchanged words hung in the air, intertwining with the smells of coffee and pastries, creating a moment so vivid it felt real enough to touch. Jake clenched his fists, feeling the tremor of uncertainty and hope dance inside him. To show up he could do that. Okay, he said, the words starting small but gaining strength. I'm listening. Tell me what to do next. Mark smiled, and the expression changed him. It was filled with confidence and camaraderie, drawing Jake further in. Let's start with a simple challenge. How about you share your experiences and thoughts more freely in our next group meeting? Jake's stomach fluttered again. Just thinking about standing in front of a group made him want to retreat. Just like that? Just like that, said Mark, unwavering that a rush of exhilaration coursed through Jake, mingling with fear. Could he really be open? As the two talked, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was a pivotal moment, a fork in the road shaping his future. Mark's words echoed in his mind a promise of potential change wrapped in the risk of exposing his vulnerabilities. When they wrapped up the conversation, Jake stepped out into the fresh air, the world buzzing around him. He felt lighter but also burdened by the weight of what lay ahead. Are you ready to face it? He whispered to himself, half in doubt, half in hope. As he turned to head home, a thought crashed into him. Was he willing to embrace every part of himself, the messy along with the beautiful? The answer hovered just beyond his reach, whispering questions of his identity, self-worth, and what it truly meant to belong. But one thing settled in his heart, a nagging sense that this was only the beginning. And beneath the surface, the urge to dive deeper had started to awaken. The evening air was cooler than Jake anticipated as he walked, each breath filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant sounds of laughter from a nearby park. He could feel the weight of his decision bearing down on him, yet a flicker of excitement danced just beneath the surface. What would sharing his truth feel like? Thoughts swirled in Jake's mind. How would he even start? The idea of standing in a circle, eyes fixed on him, waiting for him to spill out his heart, was daunting. But as he walked, he tried to imagine the words flowing, words that had been trapped inside him for far too long. That he arrived home, the familiar creaks of the wooden floor beneath his feet greeted him like an old friend. He dropped his bag near the door and sank into the worn-out couch, staring blankly at the wall ahead. Just be yourself, he murmured softly, echoing Mark's encouragement. But as the silence settled in, the self-doubt crept back in, wrapping around him like a tight cocoon. Could he really express himself? Part of him wanted to hide away, to stay inside his comfort zone where no one could judge him, but another part, a growing part, craved connection, vulnerability, even growth. Jake reached for his phone, flicking through messages until he landed on a chat with his family. A simple "Hey, how's everyone doing?" felt too casual, too shy. He hesitated before typing, and then deleted his message. Instead, he decided to record a voice message, letting his heart spill over into the device as he spoke of his struggles. His voice shook a little, and he could almost feel the weight lifting with each word. He didn't even know if he'd send it, but for that moment, he felt alive. Later that night, Jake lay in bed, his mind racing. He was facing a pivotal moment in his life, yet the thought of it left him feeling torn. His phone buzzed with a notification, a reply. His mother's voice returned, warm and nurturing, reminding him that no matter what, he was never alone in his struggles. The love flowed through her words, and it brought a smile to his face, sparking an ember of courage. With the sun breaking through the blinds the next morning, Jake awoke with determination. He wrote down his thoughts in a small notebook, bullet-pointing the emotions he wanted to express at the meeting. Nervous fingers scribbled down memories, fears, and dreams. Each line felt tangible, a bridge connecting him to the person he wanted to become. By the time he reached the meeting, every step felt like a declaration. He arrived a little early, watching as others trickled in, chatting and smiling, a mix of faces he recognized and some new. Jake took a deep breath, the familiar knot inside him tightening once again, and then, as the room filled, he saw Mark speaking softly to the others, encouragement radiating from him. When their eyes met, Mark nodded knowingly, affirming Jake's presence. As the meeting began, Jake felt the familiar rush of anxiety wash over him. But there was a flicker of the newfound courage igniting within. "Maybe I can do this," he whispered under his breath, just as the group circled up, preparing to share. Jake's heart raced in anticipation. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the place where vulnerability could transform into power. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, a sudden realization struck him, a rush of adrenaline mixed with panic. What if the truth he shared changed everything? The question lingered, sharp and echoing. And as he gathered the courage, another thought loomed even bigger. Was he truly ready for the consequences of breaking free? All eyes turned to him. The silence felt infinite, stretching out like a tightrope ready to snap. Jake's breath caught. The collective gaze of the group felt like a spotlight, warm yet overwhelming. His heart drummed loudly in his chest, each beat reminding him of the weight resting heavily on his shoulders. He felt the familiar pull of fear whispering that maybe he should just step back, blend into the background, and let someone else take the lead. But it was this very fear that ultimately pushed him forward. This was exactly why he was there. His palms felt clammy as he wiped them on his jeans, but he managed to take a step closer to the center of the circle. Deep down, he knew he wouldn't find peace until he shared his truth, and that truth was bubbling just beneath the surface. He started, voice barely a whisper, trembling slightly. A part of him wanted to bolt, to escape beneath the cover of the nearest couch, but another part urged him to push through. "I've been, struggling for a while now," he finally forced the words out. They felt like tiny seeds released into the air, vulnerable yet precious. The silence hung, thick and tangible, as he glanced around at the familiar faces of friends who had become a lifeline during his journey. There was one face among them that stood out prominently: Mark. His expression was warm, reassuring, a silent encouragement that kept Jake grounded. With each word, the knot inside him loosened slightly. "I'm scared," he admitted, the urgency sharpening his voice. "I feel like I should have everything figured out." But he took a deep breath, feeling the tension constricting his chest. "But I don't. I feel lost, and alone." The vulnerability released itself like an exhale he hadn't realized he'd been holding onto. Jake could see head nods in the circle, expressions of empathy and understanding. It was as if he were speaking a language they all knew: the pain, the hope, the human desire to connect. Jake lifted his chin, meeting the eyes of those who had come to hear him. "I've been dealing with depression, and often, I feel like I can't swim against the tide." The room shifted, a collective breath of recognition rippling through the group. Their expressions softened, and even Jake felt a slight release of weight on his shoulders, as if by saying it out loud, he had conquered half of his internal battle. The murmured affirmations around him grounded him further. "You're not alone, Jake," someone said softly, and another chimed in with a nod, "We're here for you." Those simple words wrapped around him. The fear he had carried felt lighter now amidst the shared understanding. "I guess what I'm trying to say is," Jake continued, gaining strength. "It's okay to not be okay, and it's taken me too long to accept that I need to lean on others." His chest eased as the sentiment settled in the room, the raw honesty creating an invisible bond. Just as he was feeling a surge of warmth from the connection, he noticed a new face at the edge of the circle. A man sat quietly, eyes wide with curiosity. Jake felt an impulse to reach out. What had brought this newcomer here? Was it courage, like his? Jake's heartbeat quickened again, not from fear this time, but from a recognition of shared struggle. "If anyone else wants to share, I'd love to hear your story too," he said, glancing at the man. A moment passed, and then the stranger shifted in his seat. Jake held his breath, the air charged with anticipation. Would this be the moment where more truths unfurled? He opened the door, but what would spill through it next? The stranger's eyes flickered, as if wrestling with an inner storm. Jake could see the man's struggle mirrored in his own heart. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, to let this newcomer know he wasn't alone. "Hey," Jake said gently, encouragingly. "It's okay. You can share whenever you're ready." His words hung in the air, thick with possibility. The man took a deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling like waves. "I'm Ethan," he finally said, voice shaky but steadying, a lifeline tossed into the water. "I've come here because, well, I've been feeling lost too." Jake noticed the shift in the room, how everyone leaned in, hanging on every word. The atmosphere buzzed with an unspoken understanding, a pact of vulnerability forming among them. Ethan hesitated, glancing around as if searching for a safe space to reveal his truth. "I had a tough childhood, a series of moves, school changes. I didn't really fit in." And then he paused, eyes glistening like sunlight on water. "Then my dad left." His voice cracked with the weight of those words, an anchor pulling him deeper into a sea of pain. "I always told myself I had to be strong, you know. I thought that if I held everything in, I wouldn't hurt anyone." He looked down, drawing patterns on his knees. "But it's been eating at me. I feel this emptiness, like I'm in a fog, and nothing I do seems to clear it." A hush fell over the circle as Jake absorbed Ethan's words. The hurt was palpable. He knew that fog all too well. It wrapped around him like a familiar blanket, stifling yet comforting. "I didn't realize until recently that pretending to be okay was actually making it worse," Ethan continued, his voice steadying. "And I guess I thought I'd be here for support, but I was really hoping to hear someone else's story first, to know I wasn't the only one feeling this way." That final admission struck a chord within Jake. He felt a surge of compassion. "Ethan, you're not alone. We're all navigating our own storms. Your story matters." The group slowly echoed their agreement, the atmosphere thickening with solidarity, like a warm embrace wrapping around each of them. The room buzzed with a sense of safety, each voice building a bridge toward healing. Ethan smiled slightly, gratefulness sparking in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, warmth flooding his cheeks. "I just wanted to find a way to let go of this weight. To realize it's okay to feel." As Jake watched the others nod, he felt something shift within himself, a flicker of hope igniting. Sharing had created a ripple effect, courage had spread through that circle. Jake felt lighter and stronger, buoyed by the connection they all had forged. "Maybe together, we can help each other breathe again," Jake suggested, excitement tinged with newfound determination. The room echoed with murmurs of agreement, their collective voices rising like a chorus. But what if sharing more meant we had to confront forces we weren't ready for? Ethan's eyes glinted with worry, the question hanging ominously in the air. Jake swallowed hard, a chill creeping in. They were inching closer to an edge. Would they have the strength to confront their pasts as they dug deeper? "Maybe now is the time to face it," Jake started, but the moment crackled with unvoiced fears. The invitation to open that door wider trembled before them. What awaited them beyond the threshold? Jake felt his heart race as the silence deepened, a palpable tension swirling around the group. Everyone's eyes darted to one another, seeking reassurance, salvation, or perhaps a way to keep those buried truths beneath layers of silence. Vulnerability felt like standing on a fragile bridge, and beneath it lay the unknown. Ethan shifted, gnawing at his lower lip while he weighed his options. Jake could see that while part of him craved to share more, another part was terrified of the repercussions. What if his words unraveled something darker? "Look," Jake said, his voice steady, "every story is important. Burdens are heavy, and sharing them just might lighten the load." He could feel the group's collective heartbeat echoing his, a rhythm of fear and hope intertwined. Several heads nodded in agreement, but it was Marissa, seated beside Ethan, who spoke up. "I think we should keep going. We're all here for a reason. It's scary, but maybe it's time we all take off these masks." Her courage ignited something in the group, a spark encouraging others to step forward. But what if we unleash something we can't handle? Ethan's voice trembled with trepidation. Across the room, a few heads bobbed, the weight of his words settling heavily. I get that, Jake replied softly. But if we don't confront our fears, they'll control us. We can either speak them out loud or let them linger in the shadows. The air grew thick with tension again, the room alive with unsaid truths hanging just above their heads. Then, without warning, Ethan spoke again. Okay. Maybe I need to face it. The determination in his voice made a wave of cheers erupt, the group rallying behind him like a sports team before a big game. I've been feeling so lost, not just because of my dad leaving. So much changed after that, he began again, voice trembling but steady. I didn't just lose him, I lost myself. It feels like I was navigating life with blinders on. I turned into a ghost, moving through the motions. I could pretend I was fine, but inside it hurt. He looked around, searching for support, and found it. Jake's heart ached with sympathy. He felt those very sentiments rise within him during his darkest moments. Ethan, it's okay to feel lost. You're rediscovering yourself. You're standing up now, and that's brave. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze drifting towards the ground. What if I've been pretending too long? I feel like I'm ready to explode. Then let it out, Marissa urged gently. Don't hold anything back. We won't judge. Just let it be raw. Minutes passed like hours as Ethan wrestled with his emotions, the group surrounding him steadfast, a constellation of support. After what felt like an eternity, he exhaled sharply, finally letting the truth flow. I never wanted to be weak. But now I'm tired of pretending. I want to feel, good or bad. I need to be real. A collective breath was shared, hope and fear intertwined in that moment. It struck Jake then that vulnerability was a cure for many wounds. As tears welled up in Ethan's eyes, the camaraderie swelled, wrapping around him like an embrace, softening the edges of his pain. Now Jake faced his own internal battle. He felt the weight of their collective fears, but also the glimmer of unfiltered hope. What if each of them shared their stories? Who's next? He asked, heart pounding in his chest. Would they find the courage to peel back their layers? Just as a second of silence stretched into a minute, hands began to rise, each person willing to share a fragment of honesty. Yet, deep down, Jake dreaded the thought of what might rise with their revelations. In a room full of truths, would they emerge stronger or crumble under the weight of their confessions? And then, just as another voice began to rise, a loud crash echoed from outside, freezing the moment, a harbinger of uncertainty waiting to burst through the fragile bubble they'd just begun to build. The room went deathly quiet, every eye shifting toward the window where the sound had echoed. Heavy footsteps pounded the pavement outside, a thunderous heartbeat that vibrated through the walls. Jake's stomach dropped. It was as if a thunderstorm had rolled in, shaking the foundations of their intimate moment. What was that? Marissa whispered, her voice barely audible as she leaned in closer to Ethan. The others looked around, wide-eyed, their earlier courage now melting into wariness. I don't know, Jake replied, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. He rose to his feet, edging toward the window. The air in the room felt thick, almost tangible. He peeked through the sheer curtains, squinting against the dim light that hung outside like a heavy mist. That a cluster of figures moved in the distance, their outlines shifting under the faint glow of streetlights. Panic surged within him. Had something gone wrong? Was this a moment they would all regret? Should we check it out? Ethan's voice was small, lost among the worry that buzzed through the group. Some faces nodded, while others seemed glued to their seats, uncertain. Maybe it's just a car backfiring or something, Jake tried to reassure them, but his instinct screamed otherwise. But let us not panic. Everyone, stay calm, I'll go see what's happening. He opened the door and stepped outside, the evening air biting against his skin. As he approached the street, the collective fear from behind him thickened, every heartbeat palpable in the tense atmosphere. A small crowd had gathered, their anxious murmurs wrapping around him like a heavy fog. He caught snippets of their conversations, words like accident, hospital, and emergency floated through the air. Jake's heart raced as he pushed further into the gathering, each step feeling heavier than the last. Then he saw it, a young man collapsed on the ground, surrounded by anxious bystanders. His clothes were tattered, his face pale, and blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. Without thinking, Jake rushed toward the scene, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Is anyone here trained?" he shouted as he knelt beside the fallen figure, instinct overtaking his fear. The young man's eyes fluttered open for a moment, a flicker of recognition mingling with confusion and pain. "Hey, stay with me," Jake said firmly, checking for a pulse. It was weak but still there. Relief washed over him, even as panic swirled in the air around them like a storm. People began to step back, fear cutting through the crowd as they seemed unsure how to help. "Call 911. Someone yelled, and others scrambled for their phones. Jake swallowed hard, his focus shifting back to the young man. "Just breathe. You're going to be okay. Help is coming." In that split second, surrounded by chaos, he felt a tug at his own heart. The unfiltered emotions of vulnerability they had just begun to share back in the room echoed within him. Suddenly, life felt heavy and fragile, much like the revelations that had yet to surface. Moments passed like lifetimes. He could hear sirens in the distance, growing ever closer. It was a strange contrast. The urgency outside clashed with the quiet truths shared only moments ago. He needed his friends, needed them to understand that none of them were alone. Back in the room, Jake wondered if anyone knew what had transpired outside. Would they dare to continue with their sharing after witnessing something so raw and so real? As the sirens approached, he glanced back at the gathering crowd, uncertain if their moment of truth would transform into something even darker, and just as he turned back to the young man, a chilling realization set in. What if the struggle outside mirrored their own hidden battles? Would they find the strength to keep going when the tempest of life threatened to swallow them whole? With everything hanging in the balance, Jake could practically feel the collective breath of the room holding tight, waiting for the next wave of truth to break or the fear to consume them all once again. Jake knelt beside the injured young man, every detail sinking deep into his memory, the trembling hand, the shallow breaths. Around him, the crowd buzzed with anxious energy, yet it felt as if time had slowed, each second stretching into eternity. He could hear the distant sirens approaching, weaving through the tumult. "Just stay with me," Jake urged again, his voice steady, reassuring. "You're gonna be okay." The young man's eyelids flickered, and Jake experienced a surge of urgency. He had to keep him conscious, keep the flicker of hope alive, and like his voice was the very lifeline needed, the young man finally rasped, "Help!" Just as he felt another heartbeat, Jake caught glimpses of familiar faces moving through the crowd, eyes filled with worry. Mark emerged first, his expression transformed from confidence to concern. Behind him came Sarah, her pulse matching the rhythm of the sirens. "Jake!" she called, rushing over. "What happened?" "There was an accident." "He needs help," Jake replied, focusing on the young man's face. "Stay with me, buddy. Look at me. Help will be here soon." "What's your name?" Jake asked softly. "Lucas," the young man breathed. "Nice to meet you, Lucas." "I'm Jake." "Just keep breathing." Distracted by chaos, Jake felt a warmth spill into him. The vulnerability shared earlier seemed to cascade over the crowd like a hurricane, reminding everyone that life was fragile. Meanwhile, Sarah rounded the corner and reached down to hold Lucas's hand. "You're not alone, Lucas. We're all here with you." Her voice was the calming beacon cutting through his pain. The emotions from the group circled together, merging into a force greater than any single fear. "Is he okay?" Mark asked, glancing at Jake. He had seen that worried look before, a connection to the unspoken struggles they all shared. "He's holding on," Jake said, smirking softly through tears. "Just breathe with me, Lucas. There was magic in the air, each word forming a bond through the chaos, grounding both Jake and Lucas. As the sirens pulled closer, the crowd shifted, their fears transformed into a collective breath. You could almost feel the change, grounding everyone in the moment, reminding them harshly of life's unpredictability. Then the flames of uncertainty turned to warmth when sirens blared, and paramedics flowed in like a wave of hope. Jake stepped back, feeling the weight now shared within the collective. Vulnerability could be a bridge, and they had all crossed it together. Once Lucas was cared for, something shifted in Jake. It made him reflect on the band of people waiting in that circle just moments before. The raw truths they uncovered were important, they mattered just like Lucas's life. None of them were alone. Once the ambulance pulled off, the crowd began to disperse, while Jake lingered where he stood, a surge of connection pulsing through him. Jake. Mark approached with a newfound intensity in his eyes. That was incredible. You really stepped up. This is a big deal. Jake met Mark's gaze, feeling a wave of relief. Thanks, but we all did that. It wasn't just me. At that moment, they were both right. Each person, sharing their pain and light, was part of the same tapestry woven together, a community brimming with vulnerabilities and triumphs. Jake turned to see his family and friends still buzzing with adrenaline, the realization washing over him. Life was messy, yet they could all support each other in embracing those difficulties. With newfound strength, he faced his friends with a burning desire to let that moment shift their journey. Hey, everyone! He called out, a tremor of excitement in his voice. Sensing the shift, people turned back. I know that was chaotic, an understatement. Shouted Ethan from the crowd, laughter bubbling like a fountain. Jake chuckled alongside them, and warmth filled the air further. But it reminded me of something. Life is unpredictable. We're all fighting our battles, whether it's out there or inside us. We found strength in each other tonight. We can keep sharing, it's our way of healing together. The murmurs turned into supportive nods and murmurs of agreement, and the electricity in the air sparked again. Let us keep talking, Sarah chimed in, keep being real. We need this. In that moment, a bond stretched across them like a tapestry. Jake felt liberated, the fears that once held him captive slowly breaking free like the dawn emerging from a deep night. Jake looked at Mark, a slight smile tugging at his lips. What do you say we share our stories first next time? I think we all could use that for ourselves. Count me in, Mark replied, resolve written all over his face. And with those words, they crossed over into a new chapter, each step guided by openness, and the truth rang clear. Far from being weak, vulnerability built bridges, created connections deep enough to carry shared struggles. As laughter sprinkled through the night sky like stars, Jake Thompson breathed deeply, knowing for once, he had started to dive into the unknown together. This was a fresh start, not just for him, but for every one of them. Together, they would navigate the waves of life, challenge expectations, and forge a path towards authenticity. Friendship, vulnerability, and community would guide them forward, no longer lost in shadows, but stepping into the light. Remember, if this story inspired you, there's so much more waiting. You need to subscribe now for more incredible transformations. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep this community growing. Let me know your thoughts and feelings about this ending in the comments. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this journey. Your support is what keeps us going.